Forget everything you think you know about revenge. Picture this for a second: someone betrays you. Maybe they break your trust, embarrass you, or ruin something you cared about. The first instinct is simple. Make them pay. Make them feel what you felt. But here's the twist most people never see coming. The strongest revenge isn't about hurting someone back. It's about taking back control of your own life. That's not some feel-good slogan. It's backed by how the human mind actually works and by people who've lived through betrayal and didn't let it define them. Forgiving someone on your terms doesn't mean you're weak. It means you stop carrying their damage around. It cuts the connection and frees you from the part of the story they tried to write for you. Everyone gets hurt. That's the cost of being alive. The real question is what you do with the pain. Do you drag it behind you for years? Or do you turn it into something that changes you? Here's the part nobody talks about. The person who hurt you isn't scared of your anger. Anger keeps you locked in with them. What scares them is when you finally let go. Forgiveness shuts their access down. It gives them no space in your head or your future. That's the moment you win, and they know it. Let's talk about what unforgiveness actually looks like in real life. It's 3 a.m., and you're wide awake, replaying that conversation or that betrayal for the 100th time. Your jaw is tight. Your heart is racing. Your mind is rewriting what you should have said or imagining scenarios where justice finally lands in your favor. It's exhausting and painfully familiar. This is the emotional prison of unforgiveness. Millions of people are serving their own life sentences in it without realizing they're the ones holding the key. Anger becomes a constant background noise in your mind. Bitterness starts to flavor everything you do, especially the small moments that used to feel light. It wears you down in ways that feel normal only because they've gone on for so long. Here's the part people underestimate. The stress doesn't stay in your head. It settles into your body. Research shows that holding on to resentment spikes cortisol, the stress hormone that slowly chips away at your health. Sleep becomes harder because your nervous system won't switch off when your brain is still fighting yesterday's battles. Inflammation increases, energy drops, and your immune system takes the hit, making you more vulnerable to getting sick. Even your thinking changes. Rumination and unresolved anger can make it harder to focus, solve problems, or make decisions. You lose clarity because part of your mind is always stuck replaying the past instead of paying attention to what's happening right now. Now here's the cruel irony. While you're lying awake at night, tense and nauseous from replaying what happened, the person who hurt you is probably asleep. They're living their life. They've moved on. Meanwhile, you're stuck in the same moment like a song that skips on the same note over and over. Resentment doesn't punish them. It punishes you. It keeps you tethered to a version of the past that no longer exists. Every minute you spend obsessing over what they did is another minute they're still taking from you. Every relationship that suffers because you struggle to trust is another wound that traces back to them. Every opportunity you ignore because you're too drained or too bitter to engage is another way they keep winning. The prison of unforgiveness doesn't use steel bars. It uses thoughts. And the painful part is that most people reinforce those bars themselves day after day. Now let's break the most damaging myth about forgiveness. Forgiveness isn't about them. It's not about letting someone off the hook. It doesn't mean what they did was fine, or that your pain didn't matter, or that they should be allowed back into your life. It has nothing to do with weakness or surrender. Real forgiveness is selfish in the best possible way. It's choosing yourself. When you forgive, you're not doing anyone a favor but your own. You're staging a prison break. You're cutting off the emotional cord that keeps you tied to that person in that moment in time. You're saying they no longer get free access to your mind or your peace. Think of forgiveness as a strategy for emotional survival. It's you saying, "What you did no longer dictates my life. I'm not spending my future paying for your choices." That's not softness. That's strength. Here's the interesting part. As long as you're waiting for an apology or some kind of justice, you're giving away your power. If your peace depends on their growth, their remorse, or their decisions, then they still control you. When you stop waiting for anything from them, the control shifts immediately. You become the only person who decides your emotional direction. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, and it doesn't mean trusting again. Forgiveness and reconciliation are not the same thing. You can forgive someone and still keep solid boundaries. You can forgive someone and never speak to them again. You can forgive someone and still expect accountability or justice. The change happens on the inside, not the outside. It's the release of the emotional charge, not the erasing of consequences. People who understand this are harder to manipulate. They're no longer reactive. They don't get pulled back into guilt or anger because the hook is gone. And that's what genuinely unsettles the person who did the damage. It's not anger. It's indifference. That's the kind of freedom that feels like revenge without ever throwing a single punch. Let's talk strategy. Something interesting happens when you truly forgive someone. Their actions stop having power over you. It's like they've been pressing a button that used to trigger hurt, anger, or some emotional explosion, and suddenly that button is unplugged. They push it and nothing happens. No spiral. No reaction. No satisfaction for them. That emotional detachment is a tactical advantage. It's especially powerful with people who thrive on the reactions they provoke. For them, your anger proves they mattered. Your bitterness confirms they had influence. When you move on, you remove them from your mental stage entirely. They don't get top billing anymore. They barely make the credits. Now think about the energy you've poured into resentment. The late-night replays. The imaginary confrontations. The revenge daydreams. All of that mental fuel burns hot but produces nothing. It drains your creativity, your attention, and your capacity for joy. That's the invisible cost of unforgiveness. While you're focused on the past, your present shrinks and your future stalls. But when you release that anger, you suddenly have access to all the resources you forgot you had. Your clarity improves. Your energy returns. Your creativity finds room again. You become someone who builds instead of someone who replays. One of the quiet freedoms of forgiveness is that your well-being no longer depends on them. You stop checking their social media to see how they turned out. You stop rehearsing comebacks in your head. You stop waiting for someone else to validate that what they did was wrong. None of it matters anymore because none of it determines your happiness. This is what people mean when they say living well is the best revenge. Not because it proves anything to them, but because it no longer involves them at all. Your success, your peace, your joy become entirely self-contained. Their awareness or ignorance becomes irrelevant. That's freedom. And ironically, that's the kind of victory nobody ever sees coming. Stories make ideas real. Forgiveness isn't just theory or philosophy. It changes people in ways you can actually see. Take Sarah. Her business partner of 8 years had been quietly stealing from their company. When the truth came out, the financial damage was bad enough, but losing a close friend was worse. Even after the legal battle ended and her partner went to prison, Sarah couldn't move forward. The anger froze her. She didn't trust anyone. Her health slid downhill. Her relationships thinned out. The betrayal still owned her. Then one day she recognized the trap. She took my money and my business. I'm the one letting her take my future. Forgiveness became a choice for survival, not reconciliation. 6 months later, Sarah launched a new business, this time with boundaries and safeguards shaped by experience. 2 years later, she surpassed her previous success. The betrayal didn't disappear, but it stopped defining her. The shift only happened once she released the emotional anchor. Marcus's story shows how deep these wounds can go. His father walked out when he was 12. For decades, Marcus carried the weight of that abandonment, convinced it meant he wasn't worth staying for. The anger bled into everything. His relationships faltered. His parenting suffered. Depression followed him like a shadow. At 45, his own son asked him why he was always angry. That question pushed Marcus into therapy and toward forgiveness. It wasn't fast and it wasn't easy, but the realization that changed everything was simple. His father's exit reflected his father's limits, not Marcus's worth. Forgiving didn't excuse the abandonment. It released the belief that he was defined by it. His marriage deepened. His connection with his children improved. He said he felt 20 pounds lighter even though the scale didn't move. Science backs up what these stories show. Brain scans reveal that genuine forgiveness decreases activity in regions associated with stress and rumination, and increases activity in regions tied to empathy, regulation, and perspective. Forgiveness doesn't just feel different. It rewires patterns that make peace easier and resentment less automatic. Studies in psychology show people who practice forgiveness report lower anxiety and depression, higher self-esteem, and more satisfaction in life. Their relationships improve, not just with the person they forgave but with everyone around them. They become more resilient because they've proven they can survive hurt and still choose who they become afterward. The subtle effects are often the most surprising. Opportunities show up because bitterness isn't blocking connection anymore. Relationships deepen because you're no longer half present and guarded. Creative projects finally get attention because your mental space is free again. Even physical health shifts as chronic stress eases and the nervous system calms. These changes aren't miracles. They're the natural result of putting down. So how do you actually do this? Understanding forgiveness in theory is one thing. Feeling it in your body is something else. Insight without action doesn't change anything. Start with acknowledgement. Write down what happened without minimizing, explaining away, or making excuses for the person who hurt you. Name the specific ways it affected you and the parts of your life it touched. This isn't wallowing. You can't release a wound you've never fully recognized. People who skip this step end up with shallow forgiveness that doesn't stick. Next, get curious about your resentment. Ask what purpose it's been serving. Resentment isn't just anger. Sometimes it gives us a sense of power when we feel powerless. Sometimes it keeps us connected to someone, even in a negative way. Sometimes it protects us from vulnerability. Understanding this makes it easier to replace resentment with something healthier. Useful questions to ask yourself. What am I afraid will happen if I let go of this anger? What does holding on to this give me? What is it costing me? Mindfulness helps here. When resentful thoughts show up, notice them without diving in. Try labeling them. There's that thought about what happened. Don't fight the thought and don't feed it. This creates distance. It reminds you that you are not your resentment. You are the awareness that decides what to do with it. Set boundaries based on wisdom, not wounds. Forgiving someone doesn't mean letting them hurt you again. If a person's behavior has shown you who they are, believe it and act accordingly. Boundaries formed from anger feel like punishment. Boundaries formed from self-respect feel like protection. Try writing a letter you never send. Put everything on the page. The hurt, the questions, the frustration, the sadness. Then write a second letter from a future version of you who has moved past this. Let that voice offer compassion and perspective. It helps bridge the gap between where you are and where you want to be. Forgiveness isn't a single moment. It's a process. You'll forgive and then remember and get angry again. That isn't failure. That's how healing works. Every time you choose forgiveness again, you strengthen that pathway. Over time it becomes smoother and more automatic. The real reward is inner resilience. Once you've gone through forgiveness consciously, you gain proof that you can survive hurt and still choose the person you want to be. Future betrayals won't destroy you the same way because you know the route out. You'll navigate faster with more clarity and with less fear. You'll trust yourself more because you've already handled the unthinkable and come out stronger. So here we are at the end of a long road through one of the hardest parts of being human. Back where we started, the real revenge was never about hurting someone back. It's about refusing to let their behavior dictate the rest of your life. It's choosing freedom over bitterness, progress over paralysis, peace over a fight that never ends. Every minute spent replaying what they did is another minute they get to steal from you. Every goal you postpone because you're carrying that weight might as well be credited to them. But the moment you choose forgiveness not as a cute idea but as something you live, the game flips. You become untouchable. Not because pain disappears, but because you prove to yourself that pain doesn't get to decide who you become. This is the chance to break out. To take all that energy you've been feeding the past and plug it into the future you actually want. Maybe the person you've been the most frustrated with is yourself for staying stuck, and maybe forgiveness needs to go there too. Your betrayers will move on with or without your permission. The real question is what you'll do. Stay a prisoner of the past, or start building the version of your future that makes all of this worth it. The choice has always been yours. The power has always been yours. Time to use it.